Good evening, guys. This is part 2 of the 3-part series on the channel listing the top 30 heavyweights currently active in boxing. Today's date is November the 7th, 2017. The first part 1, went up on the channel yesterday. If you haven't seen that, I would recommend stopping this video, going and watching the first part of this, which lists fighters 30 through to 21. Then coming to this video next, which lists fighters 20 through to 11. Now, on the whole, very positively received the first video. One or two comments I just wanted to address very briefly. And I knew when I made this video, I knew that there were always going to be some people who disagreed with it because, yeah, people don't like listing people based on resume. People have their own opinions on who should be in these lists. You know, you get these guys in the heavyweight division, like a few of the fighters named in the first part of the video, and people think, why on earth is that guy there? So I tried to explain that in part 1, but if I didn't explain myself clearly enough, I will just make a few additional points in this particular video. So, number of comments, probably between 15 and 20 comments saying that these lists should be done on eye test. You know, your opinion, you're entitled to it. On this occasion, we're going to have to completely agree to disagree. I do not think you can rank fighters based on the eye test in any way at all. How on earth do you compare a 5-0 prospect who has won 5 fights inside a minute by absolutely destroying tin cans compared to a 15-0 prospect who has just scraped through top level gatekeepers? You know, how do you compare the two? I mean, based on eye test, the person who's fought the lower level of opposition will always win through. You know, I just view eye test as a very ineffective way of ranking fighters. Now, you can certainly say, oh, based on eye test, he's someone I'm following. Based on eye test, he's someone I think could get to the very top. But you can't say, based on eye test, he's the 4th best heavyweight in the world. It doesn't work like that. You know, if that was the case, then the guy who simply runs through the lowest level of opposition, you know, would of course be superior. Yeah, for me, it simply doesn't work as a concept. You can talk about eye test. We talk about eye test all the time on the channel, but we just don't rank based on eye test. The concept just doesn't work, and it's not really how any rankings work. You know, if you look at the Ring magazine, do they say someone's the 7th best heavyweight in the world based on the fact of eye test? You know, I know the governing bodies are a bit ropey with their top 15s at the best of times, you know, but realistically, even they're not sort of picking out new prospects to the division, say, oh, this guy's looked absolutely devastating when he's faced a couple of journeymen. So for me, the way I like to do this is based on proven form, proven track record, and wins in the book. And that's kind of how we do it on this channel. If you don't like it, it's going to have to be a case of agreeing to disagree. You know, a lot of people were making the comments about historic form, and you know, sometimes I was putting people in my top 30 list who, you know, maybe the form was a couple of years old. Well, that's true, but boxing's a weird sport. It's not like football or rugby where the guys play every week. You know, some of the top boxers in the sport, they may only fight once a year. They may only fight twice a year. So even if we're talking about a fight that was 3 or 4 years ago, you know, in some instances that will only be a couple of fights back. So, you know, because of the nature of boxing, we do have to rely on historic form. You know, a lot of people not liking the fact that Kevin Johnson was included on the list, and a lot of people saying, oh, for Kevin Johnson you're relying on form that was years ago. Actually, that's incorrect. You know, if you watch any of my previous top 30 videos from 2016 or 2015, I didn't have Kevin Johnson in the list. I've actually reintroduced Kevin Johnson to the top 30 on the basis of his most recent win, which actually took place only a month ago when he fought Francisco Pianeta, who for me is still a top 40 heavyweight. And Kevin Johnson beat Francisco Pianeta. So, you know, I've actually rated Kevin Johnson based on extremely recent form, not historic form whatsoever. But anyway, we digress. I don't want to spend too long talking about that because I believe I explained myself in enough detail in the first video, and it's just one of those where you know, people do these things in different ways, and this is just my way of doing it. And just use that awful phrase, it is what it is. But without further ado, let's get into the next part. So in this bit, we're looking at heavyweights number 20 through to 11, so the second batch. And we're going to start with a guy whose name has been on everyone's lips in the start last week. Number 20, Bermain Stavern. In hindsight, I was guilty of overvaluing Bermain Stavern's resume. Having reflected on Bermain Stavern's resume in the cold light of day, he was never a top 10 heavyweight. He was not even a top 10 heavyweight when he was WBC world champion. Stavern actually has a paper-thin resume other than 2 wins over Chris Arreola. And you know, that Chris Arreola form is questionable. You know, how good a fighter Arreola was at the time that Stavern faced him. Stavern's obviously got the notable losses to Deontay Wilder twice. The last time in devastating fashion, as you know. He's got another loss earlier on in his career. But Stavern comes in at number 20. You know, I do believe 2 wins over Chris Arreola is still the kind of form to get you included in the top 30. Despite Stavern's history, despite the fact I've previously had him nearer the top 10, despite the fact he's been a world champion, I couldn't have him higher than 20 because this is a resume-based list, as I've said time and time again. And Stavern's resume is actually fairly thin in terms of wins and losses. So there we go. Number 19, Johan Dupar, a guy who's come up at the elite level, come up a little bit short at the elite level, lost to Wilder, lost to Povetkin, but again with some fairly solid form. Beat Robert Helenius, beat Manuel Char, you know, other bits and pieces of form as well if you look down that resume. So Johan Dupar for me comes in at 19. Yeah, I thought it was much of a muchness between Stavern and Dupar. I just sided with Dupar because I thought the Helenius and Arreola form was much of a muchness. And I thought, you know, Dupar had other bits and pieces of form, such as the Manuel Char fight, where I thought Stavern has only really beaten one opponent of note throughout his career. I know Stavern's beaten like aging guys like Ray Austin, etc., but it's kind of hard to take that into too much note when you kind of get to the top 20 level. At number 18, I think I'm correct in saying this is the first unbeaten fighter in the list so far. It's a guy I've seen very, very little of, Adam Konwaki, and I'm ranking him purely off the back of his recent win over Artur Szpilka. You know, Szpilka made it at number 30 in the list. You know, Konwaki got the job done against him. He's not got any losses on his resume. He's obviously going to be in tougher tests, but he looked good in that fight. He's someone I want to see more of. And certainly he's a one to follow in the context of the heavyweight division. Still a bit of an unknown commodity, but based on the nature of that win against Artur Szpilka, I have him at number 18. Number 17, and I can feel the stick coming already. You know, we had some debatable names, the names like Kevin Johnson, Robert Helenius, Charles Martin in part 1. This is another debatable name. This is a name that will have people doing their nuts in the comment section. But number 17 is Malik Scott. And to be frank, I just couldn't have Malik Scott lower than number 17 because of his wins. You know, Scott's a guy who's most famous for his losses, the awful performance against Ortiz, the controversial performance against Deontay Wilder, the controversial ending in the Chisora fight. You know, he's known for those losses. But Tony Thompson, a win against Thompson, a draw against Glazkov, a win over Alex Leopold, you know, and Scott beat Tony Thompson at a time when Tony Thompson was upsetting, you know, a lot of people in the heavyweight division. I think he just beat Odilon Solis twice. I believe he'd beaten David Price twice. You know, Malik Scott is one of these guys who, in an evenly matched fight, he's actually a very, very good fighter. You know, he just about does enough to get the wins in some tough matches. But when the fight goes against him and it's getting a bit tough, he tends to crash and burn. But from a pure form perspective, actually, if you look at his wins, Leopold, Thompson, the draw with Glazkov, there's not too many people who I've placed below Malik Scott who you could really say have better wins than Scott. You know, so that's my perspective on Malik Scott. Not a popular figure, someone the fans love to hate. People don't like his style, his negativity, etc. But putting all that to one side, based on form, he still deserves to be in the conversation for my money. Number 16, hopefully a less controversial pick, Dominic Breazeale. You know, the loss to Anthony Joshua was one-sided. It proved he was a long way off elite. But the resume is actually fairly decent other than that. A really good win over hyped prospect Izu Ugonu, Amir Mansour, Eric Molina, Fred Cassie. You know, Mansour, Molina, Cassie, these are all guys who narrowly missed out on my top 30, but as did Ugonu. But, you know, these are guys who are all in that top 50 bracket, and Brazil has 4 wins against them. You know, and I think that deserves some merit. It's the consistency of performances at that kind of level that make me think he deserves to be ranked at number 16. You know, some noteworthy wins for Dominic Brazil. I've heard a lot of rumours. Who have I heard a rumour that he's going to be fighting next? I heard a rumour Dominic Brazil is going to be fighting Charles Martin next, which would be interesting. I also suspect they'll be interested in making the Wilder fight. So, you know, let's see where Brazil goes. He's got attributes, he's got weaknesses, but he's someone who can potentially put himself back in the mix of a big fight if he keeps performing how he's done in his last 2 fights. At number 15, our second unbeaten fighter of the list so far. You know, and a guy who really impressed me the other day. I am, of course, talking about Ajit Kabayel, who goes in at number 15, having beaten Derek Chisora. Other wins, Christian Lewandowski, etc. But yeah, it's that Chisora form that really stacks up. He's the reigning European title holder, defended his belt against Derek Chisora and did so in really impressive fashion, suggesting that he's got a bright future in the sport. He's one I'm following, and he's one I'll be fascinated to see who he matches up with. You know, stylistically, he's like a poor man's Fury. He really is. I could see him making some waves, and to be fair, even at this stage of his career, Derek Chisora only tends to lose at that European and above level. So the fact that Kabayel's done a number on Chisora, and for my money done a number on him by a decent margin, means he deserves very much to be in this conversation. Ajit Kabayel, number 15. Now, number 14 and 13 are both going to get me in trouble. I think I'm quite safe on 12 and 11. I don't think I'm going to get too much stick for 12 and 11. 14 and 13 are going to rub people up the wrong way. And let me start with a little disclaimer by saying these 2 guys, I actually don't think there's a right or a wrong way in how you list them. If you wanted to make a case that they are top 10, I think you could do that without being an idiot. If you wanted to make a case that neither of them should be in the top 30, again, I can see a rationale behind that. I think it's very hard to list these 2 guys. Without further ado, number 14 is David Haye. You know, David Haye, a figure disliked by the fans, an unpopular guy increasingly, but the nature of that loss to Tony Bellew, you know, which was a bad loss and a loss to a cruiserweight whilst he was carrying an injury, shouldn't mean we forget some of the other stuff he's done in his career to date. You know, I know this is more historic now, but the win over Valuev, the win over Ruiz, the knockout win over Derek Chisora. You know, David Haye is a guy who, the pick of his form, still puts him, you know, probably top 5, certainly top 10. Clearly his place in the list deserves to fall slightly because of the nature of his losses, especially the fact that he lost to a cruiserweight last time out. But if David Haye can put 2 or 3 wins together, if he can reverse the form against Tony Bellew and then take on someone of note inside the top 20, you know, the nature of his previous form for me means he still deserves to be in the conversation. Now that's why I say, if the way you want to do this is to look at form over like a 5-10 year period, I don't think you are an idiot to have him in the top 10. If you want to look at it strictly in terms of the last year or 2, I don't think you'd be remiss at all not to even include him in the top 30. So I think it's a very hard task to put David Haye on a list. He's a bit of an enigma, an enigma in terms of form, a bit of a hard guy to place. I've done the best job I could. You know, I kind of thought that, like, you know, we've got someone in Kabayel at 15 who's basically just got a good win over Chisora. Well, Haye's got a good win over Chisora with lots of other bits of form as well. You know, value over Ruiz. Yes, it's historic, but it still deserves to be slightly above Kabayel and, you know, those sort of guys, the Brazils and Malik Scotts of this world, despite the nature of his losses. Obviously, the losses mean that he's outside of the top 10. So I've gone David Haye at number 14. A guy who is ever so linked to David Haye, at number 13, Tony Bellew. You know, Tony Bellew, an impossibly hard guy to place. He's had one fight at heavyweight. He's won that one fight. A lot of people believe he's won that one fight purely because of an injury. But as I said when I started doing this list in part 1, on this list, there's no, you know, he won but he didn't deserve to. A win is a win is a win. And Bellew got the win over David Haye. Because of that, I felt honour bound to place him above David Haye. The lack of any other heavyweight form on Bellew's resume meant that I felt I couldn't put him too much higher, you know, than David Haye, especially when you start considering the fact that you're getting into the upper echelons of the division. So David Haye at 14, Bellew at 13. Number 12, and this is a guy, you know, I said this at the start of the video, because this list is based on resume, I am not telling you that number 12 is better than number 20. You know, in fact, I would pick number 30 on this list to beat number 12. I'd pick Arthur Spilka to beat number 12, who is Christian Hamer. You know, Christian Hamer was iced by Marius Rock early on in his career. He was absolutely taken to school by the likes of Tyson Fury, but he is a solid fighter. Wins over David Price, wins over Erkan Tepe, wins over Kevin Johnson. You know, that's some decent form, and he deserves to be in the conversation. You know, he deserves to be in the top 15 based on the nature of those wins. You know, Erkan Tepe, David Price, Kevin Johnson, those are enough wins with today's slightly lighter heavyweight division to mean that you are on the cusp of the top 10, you know, not included in the top 10, but on the cusp. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where Christian Hammer goes. Understand he's got a fight against Povetkin next. That's going to be a very, very tough ask for him. And the loss there would be the third time he's come up short when he's kind of fought at the more top 25, top 30 level. Obviously, Povetkin's higher than that. But it would kind of maybe affect his placing. But Christian Hammer in at number 12. Number 11, Carlos Takam, a real likeable fighter. A guy who has performed with immense credit in defeat to both Anthony Joshua and Joseph Parker. When I initially sat down to write the list, I wanted to put Carlos Takam like number 7, number 8. I wanted to have him that highly. You know, I like Carlos Takam. I like watching him fight. I think he's a real good fighter. Why have I not got him higher? Put simply, it's the nature of his wins. He's got a good win over Tony Thompson. He's got a draw with Mike Perez. You know, and I've always thought Perez was a solid name to have on the list. Obviously, Perez now operating at cruiserweight, so isn't in the nature of this conversation. But, you know, unfortunately, whilst Carlos Takam has performed with immense credit in terms of his defeats to the likes of Parker and Joshua, just like I said yesterday with Hughie Fury and Andy Ruiz, I'm not going to place people massively high up the list just because they've done well in defeat. You know, that's not how you do it for me. You've got to base it as a combination of that and wins. Now, I felt that Hughie Fury and Andy Ruiz were very light in terms of wins. I think that Carlos Takam is a good bit stronger than both of those with the Tony Thompson form, the Mike Perez form. There are other bits and pieces on the resume as well. I mean, I'm not saying those are the two guys he's been. Those are probably the standout names he's been in with and hasn't lost. But I've got Carlos Takam at number 11. Let's see what way his career goes. You know, is he going to be an opponent, or can he rebuild? Can he get 2 or 3 big wins and come again? You know, it'd be interesting to see. A very likeable fighter for me, Carlos Takam, who adds something to the division. So there you go, guys. Let me recap from 30 through to 11. 30, Spilka. 29, Dimitrenko. 28, Andy Ruiz. 27, Kingpin. 26, Hellenius. 25, Hughie Fury. 24, Derek Chisora. 23, Gerald Washington. 22, Marius Wok. Number 21, Prince Charles Martin. 20, Bermain Stavern. 19, Johan Duapar. 18, Kanwaki. 17, Malik Scott. 16, Dominic Brazil. 15, Agit Kabayel. 14, the Haymaker, controversial, David Haye. 13, the Bomber, controversial, Tony Bellew. 12, Christian Hammer. 11, Carlos Takam. The top 10 are coming tomorrow. Actually, they won't be coming tomorrow because we're doing a podcast tomorrow. Top 10 most likely will be up on Thursday. So if you haven't done so already, please press subscribe so you don't miss out on that video. I've decided to run with a Joseph Parker thumbnail for this video, just to cause a bit of trolling, gentle trolling. Let's see if any Parker fans thought that I've put him outside of the top 10 and lose their minds just at the thumbnail before they actually listen to the video. Thought that might be some gentle entertainment for a Tuesday night. Other than that, guys, same request as always. Leave your comments in the section below. Let me know your thoughts. If you've enjoyed this, hit the thumbs up button. Help get us a bit more visibility and support the channel. If you're new, please subscribe. Stay tuned. Tonight's Tuesday night. Wednesday night we got a podcast discussing all things boxing. Thursday night we'll round off this list and we'll finalise the list of the top 30 heavyweights by focusing on the top 10. As always, appreciate you guys tuning in. Thanks for watching the channel.